The first preseason game of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 2026 offseason is a wrap. Tampa Bay beat the New York Jets 24-16. And even though this is the first preseason game, there is plenty to talk about without going over the top. So therefore, I have about 6 winners and 4 losers from tonight that we need to discuss. I'm Evan Winter with A to Z Sports. Let's go ahead and break it on down. All right, so look, we're not going to ping pong back and forth here by any means. We're going to go straight down the pipe in terms of winners and then in terms of losers as well. However, for this first winner, we've got a ping pong, and y'all just bear with me. But I think you'll appreciate it because it's definitely between Jalon Daniels and Connor Bazelak. And look, with all due respect to Connor Bazelak, Jalon Daniels easily won the night and Connor lost. And that's because the proof is in the pudding. Look, sure, numbers aren't the end-all, be-all, and tape matters as well. And there were a combination of both of those factors working against Bazelak tonight. And we'll just start with the numbers. He played an entire half of football. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense in that span, in that 30 minutes of football, only mustered 85 offensive yards and 3 points. Guess what Jalon Daniels did on his first drive? The Buccaneers offense racked up 90 yards, 80 net yards. If you want to take off the Paul Rubelt offensive holding call, that added an extra 10 yards to that drive. Either way, 80 or 90 yards and a touchdown on Jalon Daniels' first drive. And it's not just that. The offense looked completely different with Jalon Daniels at the helm. And now I've got my questions with Zach Robinson's play calling in the first half. And fortunately, I get to talk to Todd Bowles tomorrow. So I'm going to ask him that and just try to hopefully get some insight on everything. Regardless, it's absolutely clear that this offense was in much better hands when Jalon Daniels was on the football field. And look, I'm not trying to say Buccaneers players were sabotaging Connor Bazelak by any means. And there's also the context of Connor Bazelak had to play about like a drive, maybe 2 drives against the Jets ones, while the Buccaneers were playing backups for the most part throughout the entire night. Still, the fact remains that players were just making more plays when Jalon Daniels is in there. And sometimes there's just an aura about certain guys to where the guys around them, their teammates, up their game and are able to make more plays. And then getting down to like the film aspects of things, Jalon Daniels, had better ball placement by a mile than Connor Bazelak. And then he also just looked a lot more comfortable in the pocket. I mean, Connor Bazelak, even if the commentators said he was looking more comfortable as the night went on, when you look at his overall body of work, I mean, y'all, come on. 12 of 20 for 72 yards. That is less than 4 yards an attempt. That is unfathomable. It reminds me so much of Kyle Trask, who, yeah, sure, he looked solid, but it was because he was making nothing but easy throws. Connor Bazelak's biggest pass of the night was 12 yards to Ted Hurst. Like, that doesn't get it done. I don't care if you're an undrafted free agent, former rookie like Connor Bazelak, and you're trying to just fight your way up the quarterback depth chart. Those numbers are inexcusable. And again, I don't think Zach Robinson was doing many favors, and he did have to play against tougher competition for a couple drives. But still, Jalon Daniels lit it up. Final stats, 10 for 15, 111 yards, 3 rushes, 9 yards, and a touchdown. The offense just looked way better. It actually got into the end zone with him at the helm. And that's why the Buccaneers need to go ahead and bump up Jalon Daniels to QB3. And then, hey, look, if Jake Browning can't get over this back injury, if he can't get back on the field, then I don't see any world where the Buccaneers shouldn't make Jalon Daniels their backup quarterback. It's just that simple, really. It's all about who's playing the best. And right now in the quarterback room, not named Baker Mayfield, it's Jalon Daniels. All right, and so like I said, we're sticking with the winners so far, and then we'll move to the losers. And look, it's just got to be on the defensive side of the ball. And there was a series of plays early in the game where it just set the stage for these guys to be winners on the night. And we can't start off with anybody else but then Ayden Garnes, the undrafted free agent rookie out of Arizona. For the night, he had 3 tackles, a pick 6, a tackle for loss, and a pass breakup. And his pick 6 was exemplary of just what he's done in training camp based on the reports that we've seen, heard, and read. And look, the fact, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't have this guy anywhere near on my radar when the Bucs signed him in the offseason. And it's just a testament to the undrafted free agents they've been able to find that have not only just filled gaps and been good depth players, but they've had solid roles. They've shown they can carry their position, their respective positions whenever it matters most. Sean Tucker, Christian Izzian. I mean, there are other guys too. But at the same time, like Ayden Garnes, what he's doing, especially with the questions that surround the Buccaneers cornerback depth, it's just that's exactly what you want to see, especially in the first preseason game of the offseason, because as great as training camp can be, it can lie to us. There's been so many times where we've seen big things happen in camp and they fall off by the time second, third week of the regular season rolls around. Either way, Ayden Garnes tonight, sticky in coverage, made plays, made sound tackles, and I can't wait to see what he's going to do as he continues to stack more practices and games over these next few weeks. And then so, look, I know I said it was like a series of back-to-back-to-back plays. Elijah Roberts was a big part of this, and just to get it rounded all into shape, Garnes' pick six happened on a third down, and then once the Buccaneers got the ball back, Elijah Roberts had a sack on the first down, the very first play of the next drive, that forced a 2nd and 19 that led to a Rashad Wisdom interception. And then Elijah Roberts later on down the road had a tackle for loss that forced a 3rd and 9 and then a punt. Like, guys, this is winning football. Sure, plays, big plays are important. You need them to win games. But in clutch moments like these, and especially in succession like we saw, that is complementary football at its finest. That puts your team in the best position to win games because your guys are out there making plays, and they're making plays in repeated fashion on key downs that matter the most. And look, it would be one thing if the starters were doing this, but these are depth guys. And yes, look, I get it. Again, preseason week 1, they're playing against backups themselves, but these are the same kind of caliber players that match where they're at on the roster, right? So the fact that these guys are making these plays against that quality of opponent is absolutely huge. Because again, just talking about with Ayden Garnes and his cornerback depth, the Buccaneers' depth just in general, there are a lot of questions all across the board. And to see these guys step up like this, and spoiler alert, Rashad Wisdom is on my winners list as well with 4 tackles, an interception, and a pass breakup on the night. Elijah Roberts, 2 tackles, a sack, a quarterback hit, 2 tackles for loss. What can you say? I mean, seriously, what can you say? And I also had all 3 of these guys. If you watched the last episode of mine, I had all 3 of these guys as guys who had to have big games tonight, and they showed up and they showed out. And that is fantastic for the Buccaneers defense moving forward. So to round out the last 2 winners, I've got Damarion Williams. Dude led the team with 12 total tackles on the night, a sack, a tackle for loss, a pass breakup. He was all over the place. And look, the most important thing that really impressed me tonight with his performance was his tackling. Sure, cornerbacks, the number one thing you want them is to pick off the ball, right? But the second best thing is for them to be able to tackle, for them to be willing to step up in the run game. We've seen so many corners over the years where, yeah, sure, they're sticky in coverage. They'll get those interceptions, but God forbid a team runs their way if you're the defensive coach, because they're just going to get flattened like a pancake. So with all that being said, Damarion Williams showed up. Anytime he got his hands on somebody, it seemed like he was bringing them down. Nobody got away from him. And then he also made just some really key hits, like in the box, like firing down in there, especially like on, I think it was a 5-yard run on first down with Kenneth Nwanju, who was having a pretty solid night. But either way, Damarion Williams, 12 tackles, sack, tackle for loss, and pass breakup. And look, depth chart math can get a little tough, right? But he's making a great case for the Buccaneers to carry 7 corners on the 53-man roster going into the season. I don't know if they'll do that. They typically don't carry more than 6. But with Zion McCollum hurt, missing both the Jets joint practices, Benjamin Morrison and his hamstring issues always happening, then you've got Jacob Parrish, Keontae Scott, and then Joshua Hayes as your top 5 guys. Ayden Garnes and Damarion Williams, I mean, we'll just have to see. But right now, 7 cornerbacks isn't a crazy thing to think about. And then last but not least, Jack Pyburn, edge, 2 sacks, 2 quarterback hits, 2 tackles for loss, 2-2-2 club. I mean, the dude just had a great night. And again, deep edge room, right? And we're about to get to a guy who's on the losers list here in a second, who's in that same very room. But still, it was really good to see him take advantage of just the situation as a whole. And hopefully he can continue to stack this kind of stuff because, again, the Buccaneers pass rush has to improve in 2026 if they want to get back on top of the NFC South. And this is a good step forward right off the bat. All right, so now we're about to dive into the loser side of things. But before we do that, make sure you hit and like and subscribe because, hey, we got to get it right. So go ahead and do that for me real quick and we'll dive right on in. So yeah, with that being said, I already mentioned Connor Bazelak as the top loser on the night. He should get passed up by Jalon Daniels on the depth chart. Well, that just remains to be seen, however. But up next is Riley Dixon. And look, I don't know why Riley Dixon doesn't have any competition against him right now on the roster. It's unfathomable to me. And he knuckleballed a punt tonight. Even his 57-yarder was returned for 13 yards. So it comes out to only a 44 net average. And then he also had the one punt where it like hit inside the 10 and then bounced all the way out to the 20. The guy is just way too inconsistent. He's got a cash cap hit this year that if you cut him, you save all of it. Nothing's guaranteed. Bring in competition for this guy because we can't see the same things that we saw last year and even what we just saw tonight in the first game of the preseason. If Riley Dixon – and for some reason, I don't know why Ayden Garnes was cut. I haven't talked to anybody at the franchise and haven't heard anything or seen anything. But, like, he had a pretty interesting skill set that would have been way more valuable in terms of a challenge than BT Potter, who is just a camp leg. We know Chase McLaughlin is going to be the place kicker for this team in 2026 unless something just crazy happens. So, Riley Dixon, the Bucs have to bring in some kind of competition. He did not play well tonight. But we'll just have to see because last thing you want to do is carry 2 punters and 2 kickers on your roster, especially one that you've got a lot of depth questions to figure out. And so, like I said, we had a disappointing member of the edge room tonight. Pretty sure you guys can all guess who it is. Sure enough, Chris Braswell. I mean, look, the dude played almost an entire half of football. I don't have the full snap counts, but it was right around close to that, if not that much. He did not even show up on the stat sheet for anything. Half tackle, half sack, PBU, tackle for loss, nothing. It's like Chris Braswell did not step on the field at all tonight. I saw plenty of times where he was getting pushed out of plays. I saw plenty of times where he over pursued in the pass rush. Now, there were a couple good plays where he looked like he was on track and he was about to make the play, but it still didn't happen, and that has to change. It's not changing. It's not going to change for Chris Braswell. Whether it's just due to circumstance. Again, we talked about the speed of the game. Yeah, he just didn't get it done tonight again. And if he continues these kinds of performances, no matter what he's viewed as in terms of special teams, he's not going to make this roster at the end of the month. And who knows what happens after that. So finally tonight, Paul Rubelt, the massive 6'10" tackle out of Germany, probably going to be the Bucs IPP player this year. Regardless, had a couple of really bad penalties. One was the holding call that I talked about earlier. But then he also got called for the false start on 3rd and 7 when the Bucs were backed up inside their own 5. And look, I'm going to kind of toss that drive out the window just in general because when you're backed up against, inside your own 5, that's just such a tough situation, even if it's the preseason, no matter what. But the point remains is his false start came on a 3rd down, 3rd and 7 to be exact, and it was a false start. It was a pre-snap penalty that the player has complete control over. We all know that penalties, 9 times out of 10, it's based on a referee's judgment, their kind of call. However, false starts are on the player. It's a pre-snap penalty, illegal shifts, illegal motions, all those kinds of things. That shows a lack of discipline, a lack of focus, a lack of technique, lack of fundamentals, all that stuff. And that simply can't happen, especially from a guy who's like the 4th tackle on the depth chart at best. So Paul Rubelt, the final loser for tonight. So what do y'all think? I mean, hey, Buccaneers won, right? So, like, let's not harp on the negative too much, so on and so forth. And plus, we still got 2 more preseason games and a whole bunch of practices in between to really start figuring out this roster, so on and so forth. But who are your winners from tonight? Who are your losers? Do you agree with mine? Do you disagree? Hey, let's talk about it in the comments. But until next time, keep an eye on A to Z Sports Bucs, and we'll see you around.